A week ago, a large-scale wild hog trapping operation officially began across farmlands in Texas after the damage caused by feral pigs had grown far beyond control. Since then, my routine has become almost the same every morning, waking up before sunrise, driving down dirt roads, and checking each trap scattered throughout the areas suffering the worst destruction. And just as we expected, almost none of the traps were in. After every night, the massive steel cages were packed with wild hogs. The crashing noises, aggressive grunts, and the ground torn apart around the traps were enough to reveal just how serious this problem had become. The most alarming part was that even after capturing so many, the number appearing the following night seemed unchanged. After dealing with the hogs already caught, our next task began immediately, following the fresh signs left behind by other groups during the night. New tracks around the fields helped us determine which direction the hogs had moved. They rarely returned to the exact same location 2 nights in a row, which means the traps must constantly be relocated. We rebuilt the steel cages in new areas, spread bags of corn as bait, and did our best to make everything appear as natural as possible before leaving. Today, I'm going to show you how an entire sounder of wild hogs is gradually lured into a trap step by step. Because what makes these traps effective is not simply their size or the mechanism that closes them, but convincing the hogs that the area is completely safe. In some locations, the hogs appeared only a few hours after dark. In others, they spent several nights circling the trap, constantly inspecting it before daring to move any closer. And that's what makes trapping more of a battle of patience than a matter of luck. Then things slowly began to change. From a few lone hogs, to an entire group, from appearing for only a few minutes, to spending hours lingering around the bait site. You could see the herd becoming increasingly confident as the corn was spread deeper and deeper inside the trap. At first, they remained near the entrance. Then a few individuals started walking completely inside. Eventually, nearly the entire group pushed toward the center, competing for the corn scattered on ground. But that was also the most critical moment, because all it takes is one strange noise, one unusual movement, or a single hog detecting danger before the trap is activated, and the entire group will bolt instantly. And that actually happened in several locations. Some camera footage showed groups that were almost entirely inside the trap, when suddenly one hog turned and ran, triggering the rest to explode out of the enclosure within seconds. After an experience like that, the same group will rarely return to that trap again. But in other places, the plan finally worked. After many nights of baiting and allowing the hogs to gradually become comfortable with the trap's presence, the entire group ventured farther inside than ever before. Cameras captured dozens of hogs packed tightly together, completely unaware of the danger as they focused on the corn beneath their feet. And then the trap was triggered. In an instant, the massive steel gate slammed shut, transforming a quiet scene into complete chaos filled with crashing impacts angry grunts, and dirt flying everywhere in desperation. But this time, none of them could escape. And that was when we were reminded that the most important thing in catching wild hogs is not strength, it is patience. When daylight arrived, we began processing the hogs that had spent the night trapped inside the steel enclosure. Even after being confined for hours, they remained extremely aggressive, repeatedly charging the fencing and searching for a way out. So every step had to be carried out carefully. Once the situation was under control, the wild hogs were removed from the trapping groups. Yet despite the large numbers captured each night, the most unsettling feeling was that the population still roaming outside seemed no smaller than before. If left unmanaged, these wild hogs can destroy entire crops in a remarkably short period of time, turning months of hard work by farmers into devastation after only a few nights. They do not simply eat crops, they tear up the soil, damage farming infrastructure, and return again and again in growing numbers. And that is exactly why we are forced to trap them, not for sport, but to protect the fields, protect livelihoods, and safeguard the results of countless hours of work and sacrifice made by families across Texas throughout the growing season.
The first night, nobody saw it as a real threat. Just a few faint noises along the edge of the garden. No heavy impact. No clear sign of a deliberate intrusion. By morning, a few crop rows were trampled, some plants pulled up by the roots. People looked at each other and shook their heads. Probably just a wild boar passing through. It'll be gone tomorrow. At that time, that assumption felt reasonable. But in hindsight, that was the first mistake, underestimating the risk. On the second night, the sounds came back. Not louder, not more aggressive, just familiar. By the third night, tracks covered the same path again and again. This was no coincidence anymore. A pattern had formed. So, what was done next? And did it work? Stay with us. Once the boars started hitting the edge of the land, people began taking turns staying up at night. Fires were lit, flashlights in hand, walking patrols around the fields, just to let the herd know, humans are here. But this kind of defense burns people out. Humans have to stay awake, eyes wide open, every single night. Wild boars don't. They can stand back, stay calm, skip a night, and simply wait for the moment when exhaustion creates an opening. And sooner or later, that night always comes. By the next morning, the damage was impossible to ignore. Fences pushed aside, crops destroyed across a wide area, cracks covering the entire field. The loss didn't grow gradually. It spiked, suddenly and violently, far beyond anything before. That's when the real problem became clear. It wasn't that the wild boars were getting bolder. They had just chosen the right moment. If this cycle continued, the damage wouldn't stop at a single harvest. After that night, everything changed. No more night watches, no more random chasing. Instead, a long-term decision was made. Stop reacting after the damage, and start controlling space and behavior. The enclosure trap wasn't built to confront the boars head-on. It was built to reshape their movement. Once behavior becomes predictable, space control becomes the key. Steel frames were connected into a closed enclosure, leaving only one narrow entrance. The trap wasn't placed in an open area or somewhere obvious. It was built directly on the herd's mandatory travel route, the path they had to take to reach their familiar food source. Every detail was calculated, hidden enough to avoid suspicion, strong enough to hold under pressure, and a mechanism that didn't rely on luck. Night fell, right on schedule. The same sounds came from the same direction. The herd appeared, just like every night before. No hesitation, no caution. After many quiet nights, they had learned this place carried no real risk. That familiarity made them predictable. When the entire herd was within the controlled zone, when there was no clean escape left, the system was triggered. No loud noise, no chasing, no chaos. And most importantly, from that night on, this area disappeared from the herd's return map. One decision, made at the right time, cut off a cycle that had lasted night after night.
Yeah. Good. Go. Hi.
After that night, the land went quiet again. No fresh tracks, no repeated destruction. Not because wild boars vanished completely, but because the balance had been restored. When space and behavior are controlled, conflict doesn't escalate. In conflicts between humans and wildlife, sustainable solutions don't come from instant reactions. They come from breaking the cycle, or damage becomes irreversible.
It truly was an unforgettable experience. Even after more than 20 years working the peanut fields in Texas, I still shudder when I think back to that moment. At first light, I was out patrolling the edge where the farmland meets the forest. The ground had been completely torn up, roots ripped apart, animal tracks stamped densely across the soil. I knew I couldn't delay any longer. A full-scale containment plan was set into motion. The challenges closing in felt far beyond anything I had ever faced before. I started with the most traditional methods: one-way steel cage traps and small drop traps. The location was carefully chosen, the edge of dense brush, where deep tracks pressed into the still wet mud confirmed the presence of wild boars. The trap itself was modest in size, about 1 meter wide and nearly 2 meters long, designed only for single targets. Golden corn kernels were scattered with precision, forming a trail that lured them from the narrow entrance all the way to the darkest corner inside. After days of conditioning them, the result fell far short of expectations. Only a single, solitary boar was caught. These small traps quickly revealed their limitations. When I reviewed the camera footage from one of the drop traps, my heart sank. The boars had indeed shown up. They approached slowly, cautiously, even stepping deep inside the trap. But only a few were captured. The rest lingered just outside the perimeter, watching their trap companions with cold, unreadable eyes before slipping back into the darkness. The plan had completely failed. I had no choice but to adapt. I switched to a larger drop trap system. At around 4:30 in the morning, a sharp, hollow sound echoed. The gate slammed shut, but once again, disappointment followed. Only one had failed to escape. The boars had grown smarter with every close call. This confrontation was becoming more intense than ever. Refusing to back down against their cunning, I shifted operations to the eastern wetlands, a low, damp area rich with activity. A massive steel enclosure was constructed, reinforced with a solid frame, measuring up to 4 by 8 meters. It was large enough to contain an entire group. The bait, rich with strong scent attractants, began to take effect. These were dominant males, over 100 kilograms, with massive builds and hides as tough as armor. Hunger began to dull their instincts. Greed slowly overpowered caution. Step by heavy step, they moved deeper into the trap, unaware that the final gate was already waiting. 2:35 a.m. The alarm device vibrated relentlessly in my hand. I slammed the gas pedal, and my Jeep Wrangler pickup tore through dense brush, ripping apart the night mist. The tension was overwhelming. As I got closer, I raised a high-powered flashlight and aimed it straight into the center of the trap. Inside the cage, pairs of glowing eyes reflected back, fierce, aggressive. Low growls rumbled as a warning. Seeing that, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over me. All the worry, exhaustion, and sleepless nights of waiting had finally paid off. Dawn began to break, the fog slowly lifting. I moved deeper into the forest to check the secondary traps set along a dry creek bed. What appeared before me was pure chaos. For wild boars were completely trapped. An old sow weighing around 80 kilograms, along with her growing offspring, crammed into the tight space. They lunged repeatedly at the steel mesh, their long snouts slamming hard against the frame in desperation. Every attempt to dig their way out was futile against the reinforced locking system and dense steel wiring. Building on previous experience and success, an open plain near the edge of an oak forest, I decided to deploy my ace card, a modular smart trap system. White steel panels, tightly connected yet highly flexible to assemble and adjust. An entire family of black wild boars, from aggressive dominant males to half-grown juveniles, was now fully contained within the steel enclosure. The most destructive intruders had been completely subdued, a decisive victory for persistence. The final phase, transport, began with absolute focus. A specialized trailer over 4 meters long was backed tightly against the exit gate of the trap, forming a continuous passage. My partner and I stood on both sides, holding the guiding panels firmly in place. The sliding gate opened. The boars, cornered, had no choice but to surge forward onto the trailer. The final lock snapped shut. The entire destructive herd had been removed from the farm, restoring peace to the fields. This battle against wild boars was never just about strength. It was about the combination of modern trapping technology and the resolve of the farmer. Understanding behavior, patient observation, and decisive action, those are the keys to protecting one's livelihood. As the vehicle disappeared beyond the tree line, I knew I had fulfilled my duty to protect this land with full responsibility and determination. This place had been ravaged by wild boars many times. Fields were torn apart, fences broken down, and the damage repeated season after season. Small traps only managed to catch a few animals, while the rest of the herd quickly learned to avoid them and became more cunning with time. We could no longer deal with the problem in scattered ways. Together with the farmers in the area, we agreed to build a large trap, strong enough to capture the entire herd at once. It was a collective decision by the whole community to put an end to the long chain of destruction. As evening approached, while the sunlight was still strong enough, we began building the trap. Heavy steel mesh panels were carried out and assembled into a tightly sealed circle. Each joint was tightened carefully and driven deep into the dry ground. The sound of hammers striking metal echoed sharply through the quiet air. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a cold iron frame. But in reality, it was a giant lock waiting for the right moment to close. Once the trap enclosure was secured, we installed infrared cameras around the area, mounting them high on tree trunks to monitor the entire trail leading inside. Everything was done quickly and carefully. We minimized human traces and left early so that our scent could fade away in the wind. The final step was baiting the trap. Bags of corn were opened, their sweet scent drifting through the late afternoon air. We scattered the corn to create a faint trail leading gradually toward the center of the trap. The middle was where the bait was placed the heaviest. Step by step, the herd would be drawn deeper inside without realizing it. When everything was finished, the trap area fell silent again. Only the faint smell of corn lingered around, and somewhere in the forest, sensitive noses had already begun to catch the scent. When night fell, the forest seemed perfectly still, but none of us truly felt at ease. Then suddenly, movement appeared on the screen. The wild boars had arrived. The large lead so stepped forward first, sniffing the air as she followed the scent of corn. One by one, big and small, the rest of the herd slowly moved toward the trap. Wild boars possess powerful survival instincts and sharp awareness of their surroundings. But tonight, hunger and the sweet smell of corn outweighed any danger they might have sensed. Guided by the leader, the others followed behind. Without suspicion, without hesitation, they rushed in to enjoy the food. When we were certain the entire herd was inside the trap, suddenly, bang, the final watcher triggered the drop gate. The sharp crash of steel echoed across the forest. In that instant, the quiet woods exploded into chaos. The wild boars panicked, charging in every direction, slamming into the steel fencing, colliding with one another as they tried desperately to escape. The ground was torn apart beneath their powerful hooves. The mesh walls shook violently. The strongest boars attempted to ram the fencing with brute force, but it was all useless against the sturdy, carefully designed steel enclosure. The elasticity of the mesh pushed the powerful animals back each time they lunged. Some of the smaller boars tried to climb or leap over the barrier, but the height of the fence stopped them every time. Panic spread through the herd as they realized they were completely trapped inside a steel prison. In that moment, no one in our group dared to breathe too loudly. Everyone understood. This was a confrontation between the wild survival instincts of the boars and a plan carefully designed by humans. Before dawn broke, we approached the trap. The boars were no longer thrashing wildly as they had during the night. Many were exhausted, breathing heavily. Some stood quietly, their legs heavy with fatigue. Yet their instincts still pushed them to run whenever they sensed movement. Seeing the herd of more than 20 boars captured at once, the farmers finally let out a sigh of relief. Before opening the trap, the team checked every lock and joint again to make sure the structure remained secure. They carefully observed the animals to ensure the herd would not erupt into panic again. Each boar was restrained, following proper safety procedures. Specialized tools were used to prevent injuries, both for the people involved and for nearby livestock. The wild boars were then loaded onto trucks for further handling. Part of the harvest would be shared among the community according to prior agreement. The rest would be processed according to local regulations, ensuring disease control and environmental safety. After everything was finished, the surrounding area was checked one final time. The forest was returned to the quiet state it had before. And when everything was over, everyone understood that the success of the night did not come from luck or individual strength. It came from choosing the right plan from the very beginning. A large net trap, placed in the right location and strong enough to hold an entire herd, prevented the need for countless scatter traps, the kind that only lead to repeated failure. No one forgot that deeper in the forest, there were still other wild boars. But the events of that night had proven something important. When people stand together and choose the right solution, they can protect their crops, reduce damage, and keep the community safe.
Feral hogs are not the strongest animals in the wild, but they are among the most dangerous when they move into human landscapes. They don't destroy with a single strike, they destroy through repetition. And sometimes, the most important lesson isn't about eliminating a problem, but about learning how to manage it properly. In the first test, the trap was set with full confidence. The sounder moved in smoothly. Everything looked right. For a moment, the plan seemed solid. Then, the problem appeared. The gate didn't drop evenly. The response was slower than expected. Just a small delay, and the entire system lost its effect. The hogs slipped out with little resistance. This failure wasn't because the hogs were too smart. It was because the human mechanism wasn't precise enough. In wildlife management, a minor error is all it takes to collapse an entire control strategy.
Once through.
After the initial setback, a familiar solution was deployed. Figure 6 hop trap, a design that had worked well in other locations. But this time, the outcome was different. The hogs approached more slowly. They moved cautiously, scanning their surroundings and reacting clearly to small irregularities. There was no blind rush. Instinct had been replaced by evaluation. When behavior changes, old solutions lose their edge very quickly. At this point, the strategy shifted. Instead of trying to capture the entire sounder, the focus moved to redesigning and testing drop traps for individual hogs. The goal was no longer numbers, it was behavioral precision. The trap was lower, the response was faster, and most importantly, the sense of pressure during entry was minimized. This is a principle widely used in modern wildlife management. Small, precise interventions instead of large, high-risk actions. At this stage, hogs proved they weren't easily fooled. The issue was no longer hog behavior, it was how the trap communicated with them. The decisive shift came with the full adoption of one-way doors. Hogs could enter naturally, without feeling blocked or forced, but when they turned back, the door's mechanics made exit increasingly difficult. This system works with natural behavior rather than against it, reducing stress and unnecessary risk.
Well, good news is they definitely some old foul hogs. Put one of them on the grill. Yeah. You can't be doing all that. Shame on you.
This time, the problem wasn't a mechanical failure, it was a false signal. Noise, vibration, and irregular movement sent the wrong message. This place isn't safe. The fix focused on hinge alignment, smoother motion, and sound reduction. Once corrected, the door stopped drawing attention. It became a natural part of the path. The final variable to refine was timing. Choosing the right moment became critical. With the introduction of remotely activated smart gate systems, human presence was no longer required on site. Here, Technology wasn't used to apply force, but to reduce human visibility, lower stress, and minimize risk on both sides. This time, the trap functioned exactly as it was designed to. After repeated failures, adjustments, and trials, success didn't come from luck. It came from patience and a willingness to learn. When intelligence is placed above instinct, humans don't just protect their crops. They build a sustainable control method, capable of long-term use in modern wildlife management.
I'd seen wild hogs caught in traps before, but I had never seen anything like that morning. The sound of steel wire pulled tight, the sound of dirt being torn up, that deep, heavy roar echoing through one corner of the woods. The hogs were thrashing hard, desperately trying to break out of the traps I had set earlier. The whole net system was shaking violently, and it all started because of one destroyed field. Last week, I went back to my hometown to visit my grandmother. As soon as I stepped into the yard, she didn't say much. She just quietly pointed toward the cornfield behind the house. I looked over. Half the field was ripped apart. Corn stalks were snapped flat, roots torn out, and the ground looked like it had been churned by a tiller. But nobody runs farm equipment out here at night. There was only one thing that could have done this. Wild hogs, and not just one or two. The neighbors said the hogs had been coming back for weeks. They tried fencing the field. They tried standing watch at night with torches. Some even took turns sleeping in the field shack. But these hogs weren't afraid of people anymore. They came in late. They tore through everything fast, and they vanished before sunrise. One of the older hunters in the village told me, "This sounder has a smart lead boar. He's the one guiding them. If we don't stop them now, this season's a total loss." That same morning, David, a few men from the village, and I decided we had to act immediately. This was going to be a large-scale operation, so we split into smaller teams. Following the hog tracks from the cornfield, we found the perfect location to set the traps. We had already brought in all the gear. This time, we decided to use net traps. Everyone took a job. One team drove heavy steel posts into the ground to lock down the trap positions. Another team unrolled thick coils of netting we had prepared ahead of time. Others stretched and tied the net. Every section had to be pulled tight and fastened carefully to the steel posts. It looked simple, but if even one part was off, the whole trap could fail. By the time the last net panel was up, the woods had gone completely silent. As soon as darkness settled in, the forest changed. The air felt heavy, like the whole place knew something was about to happen. We checked the traps through the cameras. One by one, the hogs started showing up, but I didn't expect that many. They moved slowly into the net trap, not sensing a thing. Then one hog suddenly noticed something was wrong and tried to bolt, and everything exploded into chaos. The net snapped tight like someone yanked it with full force. My heart started pounding. A big sounder had hit the net, more hogs than I could count at first. They thrashed hard, slamming into the mesh and making the whole section shake. And before I could even process that success, David yelled from the side. I turned to the screen. His net was buckling too. We hadn't even had time to say a word to each other when another loud crash echoed up from the valley below. I was pumped. It wasn't just one trap working, the whole trap system was going off, one after another. Net walls bulged in the dark. Everywhere, you could hear thrashing, deep grunts, the sound of the woods coming alive. It was a strange feeling, part adrenaline, part excitement. We split up and ran to each trap point. Flashlights swept through the trees. Everywhere we looked, nets were shaking. Everywhere we looked, we had a catch. And I knew it. That night belonged to the net traps. After one long, tense night, we headed back to the trap sites at first light. Up close, that's when I really saw how big they were. Thick shoulders, scarred snouts, heavy muscle rolling under coarse hair. Looking at them, I felt two things at once: relief and a chill down my spine. These weren't just crop-raiding animals. They were survivors of the wild. And every one of them had to be handled humanely, following local rules and regulations, even after all the damage they had caused to the farmers here. On the way back, one of the hunters behind us suddenly stopped. He pointed at the ground near the edge of the trail. Another track, bigger, deeper. It meant the lead boar was still out there. I turned and looked back into the woods. If he was right, then this hunt had only just begun.
You might not realize this, but in wild boar control, the greatest danger doesn't lie in the moment the system is triggered. It lies in what comes after. Invisible traces don't vanish right away. Scent, sound, disturbed behavior patterns. To the rest of the herd, those traces are information. They're clues to answer one question only: is this place still safe? If handled carelessly, a single intervention point can quietly turn into a familiar checkpoint, one the herd remembers and returns to, raising the risk instead of reducing it. That's why the true goal of the entire system isn't how many animals are caught, but whether the behavioral loop of the herd is fully broken. At the forest edge, the smart enclosure records the first response. A few individuals are held back, while the rest of the herd stays at a distance, watching, not fully retreating. That tells us one thing clearly: this area hasn't been erased from their movement map yet. Instead of waiting longer to draw more in, the control team moves early. The first captured animals are transported out immediately, preventing the site from turning into a confirmation point for the herd behind. Once the vehicle leaves, the forest edge settles back into normal. No signals remain, nothing left to assess, no reason for the herd to return. In the buffer zone, the system never fully activates. The boars approach, leave traces, then pull away. In many cases, this would be labeled a failed operation. But this time, the response is different. The area isn't left overnight. Biological traces are removed. The space is reset to what we call an information empty zone. At the same time, the transport route from the forest edge is quietly adjusted to pass through this area without leaving new signals behind. When the herd comes back to check, they find nothing familiar, no confirmation. The buffer zone loses its role entirely. It's no longer a link in the herd's movement chain. Near residential areas, the large enclosure system is fully deployed. This is the most sensitive zone, where every action must put community safety first. The rules here are strict. No prolonged handling on site, no gathering points, no curiosity, no uncontrolled contact. The goal isn't just to resolve the immediate situation, but to make sure this place never becomes an attraction point again. In a short time, a high-risk zone is converted back into a safe space for local residents. All captured individuals are transported to the designated handling locations according to regulations. This ensures they don't return to their old territory, don't create location memory for other herds, and don't introduce secondary risks to nearby communities. Throughout the process, transport isn't just a technical step, it's the final lock that seals the entire control system. Once movement is cut off, the chain of risk ends right there. A trap can control individuals, but only proper handling and correct direction can maintain long-term stability. In wild boar management, success isn't measured by how many are caught, but by whether dangerous behavior is prevented from happening again. When the herd signal chain is broken, the risk chain to crops and communities is broken with it. Quietly, responsibly, without extremes. And the greatest success of all, when the community no longer has to think about wild boars at all. Follow us and continue the journey with us. Dramatic, real, and rooted in the mission of protecting our homeland from wild boar threats. Not every appearance of wild boar is a problem, but when fresh tracks overlap old ones, when the same routes repeat night after night, that's when territory is being taken, quietly, without a single confrontation. For the people living here, danger doesn't arrive overnight. It builds step by step, until the distance between wildlife and daily life is gone. So the solution chosen isn't confrontation, it's the creation of a control system designed to reduce conflict and protect human living space. Let's take a closer look at how that system works. The Boar Buster system is installed after days of field scouting. Placement, approach angles, and timing are all calculated based on the herd's movement habits. As night falls, infrared cameras pick up the first movements from the forest edge. The boars don't rush the bait. They stop, watch, test the ground, study the frame. This is typical behavior of animals shaped by constant survival pressure. The system activates exactly as planned, but the drop happens just a fraction of a second too late. That tiny delay is enough. The most alert individuals sense the danger. Within seconds, the entire herd pulls back cleanly, leaving nothing behind but an empty trap. This isn't a failure of equipment, it's a mismatch between mechanical timing and the razor-fast instincts of wild animals. By daylight, the system is fully inspected. No mechanical damage, no warped frame, no trigger malfunction. The problem lies in deployment. The hanging height isn't optimal, the sensor angle is slightly off, and most critically, the response delay is slower than a wild boar's natural reflex. Wild boar live in a world where survival is measured in seconds. They are smart, adaptive, and they never fall for the same mistake twice. Once danger is recognized, the behavior of the entire herd changes immediately. If the same setup is kept, the risk isn't repeated failure, it's escalation as the herd becomes more cautious and harder to manage. Sometimes, the smartest move is to stop before things get worse. Instead of pushing forward, all activity is paused. This isn't hesitation, it's restraint, meant to avoid further imprinting stress or warning signals onto the herd. The system is rebuilt from scratch and tested through continuous demo runs. Every detail is measured: drop speed, approach angles, natural movement lines. The goal isn't the fastest reaction, it's the right one. Consistent, predictable, reducing stress on both the animals and the surrounding environment. Once all parameters reach optimal levels, the system is redeployed at known entry points into farmland. That night, the herd appears exactly along its usual route. This time, the control process completes cleanly. The trigger responds fast and accurately. No panic, no uncontrolled collisions, no spillover risk. More importantly than what happens that night is what happens afterward. The herd's familiar movement route is cut off, and just like that, peace is restored, allowing local farmers to return safely to their fields.
Let's get them.
If the first intervention had gone perfectly, the most important lesson might have been missed. Wildlife control isn't for rushing, and it certainly isn't about blind faith in equipment. It demands observation, analysis, and constant adjustment. That moment of failure is what ultimately saved the entire harvest. Not through luck, but through clear judgment and responsibility in knowing when to act and when to stop.
Let's go on in. One, two.
In just one night, an entire season's worth of work can vanish. Not because of weather, not because of pests, but because a sounder of wild hogs has decided this land is worth coming back to every single night. For a small farm, a season's harvest can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what's lost isn't just crops, it's the rhythm of a family's life. Once hogs mark a place as a safe food source, the question is no longer if damage will happen, but who takes back control first. Stick with us, we'll show you how that answer unfolds. It starts small, a few patches of torn up soil, broken rows, flattened plants. Then, the tracks show up, same time, every night. Wild hogs don't move randomly. They return along familiar routes, stop at a distance, observe, and only move in once the area feels safe. If action isn't taken early, recovery costs will always exceed the cost of initial control, and the longer it goes on, the smarter the sounder gets. Instead of going all in from the start, the first move is strategic, setting up a small drop trap to study behavior. Wild hogs are highly cautious. This phase isn't about catching as many as possible. It's about reading the rhythm. Which hog enters first? Which hangs back? How long before the group reacts? Get it wrong once, and you don't just lose a night. You lose the next opportunity. In wildlife control, understanding behavior is always worth more than rushing into action. Once herd behavior becomes clear, leaving the same setup too long allows the trap to be recognized, so the strategy evolves. The drop height is increased, the trigger time is shortened, the herd's reaction window is cut to a minimum. An elevated drop trap doesn't need to be more complicated, it just needs to be precise at the moment that matters. In areas where this method is applied, results are usually immediate. The herd has less time to scatter. Group instinct works against them. Multiple animals are held at once, and damage is stopped right at the hotspot. This is what happens when the timing and the method are right.
It's a big hog right there.
And that would be the boar. Oh shit, grab the gun.
After successful captures, the trap continues to evolve. A cleaner release mechanism, a stronger frame without increasing cost, bait placement adjusted using real data. The goal isn't the biggest trap. It's the trap that fits the farm's exact conditions. Effective control doesn't come from scale. It comes from understanding the problem and refining the smallest details. By cutting off the sounder in time, damage was reduced to a manageable level, and this land is no longer a nightly destination. More importantly, the farmer took back control through observation, discipline, and choosing the right moment. Don't chase the herd, lock down their route, and strike on the right beat. If you've dealt with wild hog damage, share your situation in the comments so others can learn from your experience. This content is for situational context and safety lessons only. It does not replace local guidance. Always follow local laws and work with experienced professionals.